Hello, everyone, and welcome to Subreddit Dreams. I've been scouring the front pages and hidden gems of Reddit to bring you the most fascinating and unbelievable stories on the platform. If you love a great narrative as much as I do, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. Grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let's get straight into the stories.
Story 1. I know what he told you. He told you I cheated. He painted a picture of a wife who got a new job, a new life, and decided her quiet, loving husband wasn't good enough anymore. He showed you the texts. He has proof, right? Words on a screen stripped of all the silence and sadness they were born from. But my story doesn't begin with a coworker named G. It begins 8 years ago with a phone call that broke something in me I never managed to fix. We were long distance then, young and stupid and planning a whole future. I was completely in love with him. One night he called. I remember his voice was shaky. He told me he'd slept with someone. It was just once he was drunk, it meant nothing. All the usual excuses. The world just collapsed into the tiny speaker of my phone. I could barely breathe. But I loved him. So we worked through it. That was his phrase. What it really meant was that I cried for a week and then I swallowed the hurt and decided to pretend I was okay so I wouldn't lose him. The crack was there from the start. We just put a cheap rug over it and tried not to trip. We got married, bought a house. From the outside, it was perfect. He calls us shut-ins, and he says it like it's a cute, cozy thing. For him, it probably was. His entire world was in his gaming headset. He had his friends, his missions, his victories. He was a hero in that world. My world was the four walls of our living room. My companion was the Netflix menu scrolling through the same shows over and over. The silence was the worst part. Our house was so quiet. I'd try to talk to him, to tell him about my day or something funny I saw. I'd start a story and he'd just say, His eyes glued to the screen, fingers clicking away. I wasn't a partner. I was an interruption. An NPC in his real-life game. I got so tired of starting sentences I knew I'd never get to finish. So eventually, I just stopped trying. We'd sit in the same room for hours and not say a word. He was happy in his world, and I was just there. Invisible. Getting that promotion wasn't about the money. It was a lifeline. Suddenly, I was leaving the silent house and going to an office full of people. People who talked and laughed. People who would ask, "How was your weekend?" and then actually listen to the answer. It was like I had been holding my breath for 8 years and could finally exhale. I remembered what it felt like to be a person, not just a piece of furniture in someone else's life. That's when the drinks after work started. It was a group thing at first. A bunch of us from the new team going out to celebrate. It felt so good to just sit and talk, to feel like I was part of something. And that's where I got to know G. My husband will tell you he was my affair partner. The truth is, he was just an audience. He was the first person in years who looked at me when I spoke, who didn't have one eye on a screen. He'd ask a question and then wait for the whole answer. It was that simple. I knew my husband wouldn't understand. The man who cheated on me 2 months into our relationship had the nerve to be incredibly jealous. If I told him I was meeting a male coworker for a drink, he would have torn the house apart with accusations. It would have been a huge, ugly fight. So I took the easy way out. I told him G was gay. It was a stupid lie. A cowardly lie. But I was just so desperate to have this one small piece of my life that was safe, that didn't come with suspicion and anger. I wanted one friend without having to defend it. Our text conversations became my diary. He was the only person I could tell how I really felt. My husband found those texts and he's using them as his evidence. He saw that I was looking at apartments, and I was. Not because I was planning to move in with G, but in the same way you look at beach houses you can't afford. It was a fantasy, an escape. I'd sit on the couch listening to my husband yelling at his friends online, and I'd send G a link to a tiny one-bedroom apartment downtown and say, "Imagine, it was a game we played dreaming of a life where I wasn't so suffocatingly lonely." He saw the text where I said I just want to be impulsive for once. He thinks that meant I wanted to sleep with someone. It meant I wanted to feel something, anything other than the flat gray numbness of my life. It was a scream. I wanted to just get in my car and drive, or book a flight somewhere, or do anything that wasn't on our rigid, silent schedule. And the worst one I called, "Our marriage a failure." That was the text that he probably thinks proves everything. It was late one night. My husband had been gaming for 6 hours straight without saying a single word to me. I felt so utterly alone sitting in my own home next to the man I married. I texted G. "This whole thing is just an unfortunate failure." It was raw and ugly and true. It was a moment of pure despair, whispered to the only person I knew wouldn't judge me. I couldn't say it to my husband. To him it would have been an attack. To G it was just a confession. I knew it was a dangerous game. I kept our chat on mute. I would delete messages sometimes, not because I was hiding an affair, but because I was terrified. I was terrified he'd find my one safe space, this one little outlet for all my sadness, and destroy it. He found it, he wouldn't see a cry for help. He'd only see betrayal. And then I would be completely and totally alone again. Last night I got home from drinks with G and a few others. The house was dark, which was weird. My husband's car was in the driveway. I walked in and called his name. No answer. The only light was the glow from his computer monitor in the office. I walked over, expecting to see him with his headset on, lost in his game like always. But the chair was empty. His headset, which is Times, Always Times on the desk, was gone. His keyboard was dark. A cold feeling washed over me. Something felt wrong. I pulled out my phone to text him, my hands starting to shake. "Hey, where are you? Everything okay?" The message showed as delivered. I waited, staring at the screen, my heart pounding in the suffocating quiet of the house. A moment later, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was him. My relief was so sharp it hurt. I answered a breathless hello coming out. "Don't bother coming to look for me," he said. His voice was flat. Colder than I'd ever heard it. It wasn't angry. It was empty. What are you talking about? Where are you? I came home and... He cut me off. I'm at my mom's. I packed my things. I sank down onto the arm of the couch, my legs suddenly weak. You packed? Why? What is happening? Then he started reading. He read my own words back to me, but his voice twisted them into something ugly and cheap. It would be nice to just be impulsive for once. What did you have in mind? He asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. What impulsive thing were you and G planning? My blood ran cold. How did you? You went through my phone. Don't change the subject, he snapped. What about the apartments? You've been looking at apartments behind my back. Planning your new life. He read out the address of the one I'd sent to G just a few days ago. The little one-bedroom I'd been fantasizing about. That was a joke, I whispered, my voice barely working. It was a fantasy, like looking at beach houses. You know we can't afford. And this one's my favorite, he said, ignoring me completely. This whole thing is just an unfortunate failure. Our marriage. Our 8 years. A failure. I started sobbing then. Huge, ugly, gulping sobs. It felt like he'd reached into my chest and pulled out my heart just to show me how black it was. You don't understand, I cried. You're taking it all out of context. I was just sad. I was lonely. I was talking to a friend. A friend you lied about, he shot back. A friend you told me was gay so you could go out drinking with him whenever you wanted. I called your office, by the way. Asked for G. A woman answered. His wife. The whole world tilted. The stupid protective lie I had told had just become the nail in my coffin. I lied because I knew you'd be like this, because I knew you wouldn't let me have a friend. I have to go, he said, his voice void of any emotion. My mom helped me pack. She thinks you're disgusting. Hearing that felt like a physical slap. He had gone to his mother, shown her my private thoughts, and let her pass judgment on me before I even knew I was on trial. He didn't come to me. He didn't scream at me. He just quietly dismantled our life, enlisted his mother's help, and left. He tried and convicted me in a secret court, and this phone call was just the sentencing. Please, I begged the word, tearing out of my throat. Please just come home. We can talk about this. I know how it looks, but I swear nothing happened. I was just venting. I felt like you hated me sometimes. I just wanted to feel needed. It was the truest thing I'd said in our entire marriage, laid bare and pathetic over the phone. There was a long pause. For a crazy second, I thought it might have worked. I thought I might have broken through the ice. I don't hate you, he said, and his voice was so tired. I just don't want to be married to you anymore. I'll have the divorce papers sent over. Divorce? The word was absurd. No? Let's go to counseling. We can finally talk about everything. About what happened at the beginning. We never really fixed that, did we? We just put a rug over it. I was desperate, throwing anything at the wall, hoping something would stick. There's nothing to fix, he said. You made that clear. It's a failure. And then he hung up. I sat there in the dark, silent house, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. I didn't move for an hour. I just stared at the empty space where his gaming chair used to be. The silence I had hated for so long was now absolute. He wasn't just in another world anymore. He was gone. The next few days were a blur. I walked through the house like a ghost, noticing all the little things he'd taken. His toothbrush holder was gone. The weird sci-fi poster he loved was off the wall in the office. His ugly recliner was missing from the living room. He'd managed to take everything that was his without leaving a trace, erasing himself from our home. He gets to be the good guy in this story. He gets to tell everyone that his wife got a promotion and immediately started planning to leave him for a coworker. He has the proof. He has the texts. He is the victim, the poor husband who was blindsided and betrayed. He found my cry for help and decided to use it as his get-out-of-jail-free card. He never had to face the quiet misery we were living in. He never had to answer for the years of neglect, for the way he made me feel completely and utterly invisible. He never had to own up to the fact that he broke us right at the very start, and never bothered to learn how to fix it. He just covered the crack with a rug and got angry when I finally tripped. I'm not innocent. I lied. I hid my friendship and my feelings because I was a coward. I built a little wall around my heart and only let one person see inside. I see that now. But my crime wasn't cheating. My crime was being unhappy and daring to tell someone about it. He thinks our marriage ended with that phone call. He thinks it ended when he read my texts. But he's wrong. Our marriage didn't end last night. It ended 8 years ago with a different phone call when he confessed to cheating on me. Everything since then has just been an echo. I've been living in the ghost of a marriage for years, and I guess I should be grateful he finally decided to turn the lights out. But right now, all I can feel is the cold.
Story 2.
I know what you probably think of me. You've probably heard his side or a version of it and decided, I'm the monster. The cheating girlfriend who got a DUI with another man in the car. The mother who abandoned her responsibilities for a cheap thrill at a bar. I get it. On paper it looks bad. But a life isn't lived on paper. Our story didn't start out like this. 8.5 years ago, he wasn't my 2 7-year-old boyfriend, and I wasn't a 3 1-year-old mom. We were just 2 people who crashed into each other. Our life was loud and messy and fun. We stayed out too late, slept in too long, and built a whole world that was just for us. It was reckless and beautiful, and it was everything. Then he got what he called a decent job. For him, it was a step up. It was security, a future, all the things you're supposed to want. For me, it felt like he was punching his ticket and getting off the ride we were on together, leaving me to spin around by myself. His new life started at 3 a.m. every single morning. That meant our old life had to end by 9 p.m. every single night. While he was building a career, I was going to bed alone. Then our daughter was born and my world shrank to the size of our 2-bedroom apartment. I love that little girl with an ache so deep it feels like it's part of my bones, but my entire identity dissolved into being Mom. My days were a blur of diapers, feedings, and nap schedules. His days were promotions and projects. He would come home exhausted, eat the dinner I made, and be asleep on the couch an hour later. We stopped talking. Not fighting, just not talking. The silence was the worst part. It was a constant reminder of how alone I was, even when he was in the same room. I was a mother, and I was his partner. But somewhere in there I was still times me asterisk. And I was suffocating. That's why I started going to the bar after my shift. It wasn't about getting drunk every night. My brother was usually there, a few of our old friends. It was the only place in the world where I wasn't just a function, not just Mom, not just the girlfriend of the guy with a decent job. It was the 1 hour a week where someone might look at me and just see times me asterisk. He said he was comfortable with it, but it always felt like an allowance he was granting. Like he was patting me on the head and letting me go play before I had to come back to the quiet, serious world he had built for us. The messages started innocently enough. Hey, what's up from an old friend on Facebook. It was a tiny spark in the gray fog of my life. A reminder that I was still a person someone might think about after 10 p.m. It was a lifeline, and I clung to it. That night in November, I felt like I was at the bottom of a well. I just closed up the store, and the thought of driving straight home to that suffocatingly quiet house to him, already half asleep, was more than I could bear. It felt like walking willingly into a cage. I just needed to breathe. I texted him, swinging by the bar for a bit. It wasn't a question. I didn't have it in me to ask for permission to feel human for an hour. One drink just numbed the edges. The second one made me feel a little bit like the girl he'd first fallen in love with, the one who could laugh without feeling guilty. An old mutual friend was there, and we started talking. Really talking. Not about the baby's sleep schedule or what bills were due. We talked about music and stupid memories and nothing important at all, which made it feel like the most important conversation I'd had in years. I felt heard. I felt seen. I had way too much to drink. He needed a ride, and I made a decision that would blow up my entire life. We got into my car parked in some random quiet neighborhood. The plan was to drop him off, but we just kept talking. The world outside the car was dark and silent. And for a little while, the loneliness was gone. It was replaced by a stupid, messy, desperate connection. One thing led to another. It was a mistake born from a deep, aching void inside of me. The flashing lights of the police car shattered everything. The arrest was a humiliating blur. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely dial his number from the station. His voice on the other end wasn't worried. He wasn't scared for me. He was times annoyed, asterisk. His first questions were about the car, the tow yard, the logistics. I was a problem that had messed up his schedule. When he finally showed up to bail me out, he looked at me, not with sympathy, but with cold, hard disappointment. The next day, he went to get the car from the impound lot. He walked into the house silent, and in his hand he was holding my panties. I'd taken them off in the car, and in the chaos and panic of the arrest, I'd completely forgotten. He held them out to me, not like a confused partner, but like a detective presenting evidence. His eyes were like ice. What is this? He had already tried and convicted me in his head. There was no room for explanation, no space for the messy, complicated truth about how lonely I was. He saw the evidence and he made his judgment. What was the point in confessing to the prosecutor? So I lied. I made up some pathetic story about them falling out of a gym bag. He didn't believe me, and I didn't expect him to. For months we lived like ghosts in our own home. The silence was heavier than ever. I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then came the night before his birthday. A few of his friends were over. He did his usual thing, drank too much too fast, and was passed out on the couch by 10. While he was snoring a few feet away, his best friend's brother started sending me messages. Uncomfortable, flirty messages. I felt trapped in my own living room, giving short, polite answers, just trying to make it stop without causing a scene. The next morning, I woke up with a knot of dread in my stomach. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from him. My boyfriend. My heart stopped when I read it. It was only 2 words. I know. I stared at the screen at those 2 little words. I know. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I walked out of the bedroom, my bare feet cold on the hardwood floor. He was sitting on the couch, the same spot where he'd been passed out just hours before. In his hand was my old phone, the one I'd given him to use for music in the garage. The screen was lit up, showing my Facebook messages. The violation hit me like a physical blow. It was worse than anger. It was a cold, creeping dread. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't look up from the phone. He just scrolled. "I've known for a while that something was wrong. Since November. I just needed to be sure." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were completely empty of anything I recognized. "You're a good liar. But you're not very good at covering your tracks." He started reading things out loud. A message from the guy from that night. An explicit back and forth with someone else from a few weeks before. He read my words back to me in a flat, dead voice. He'd become a detective in our relationship, and this was his grand reveal. He even brought up the messages from his friend's brother the night before. "While I was asleep on this couch, you were messaging my best friend's brother." He messaged me, "I finally found my voice. I was trying to be polite and shut it down without making a scene at your own birthday party." "Just like you were just talking in the car that night," he shot back. "I'm not stupid. I know you delete things. I've seen it. You clear out entire conversations. But you get careless. You miss things." He was right. I deleted them because I was ashamed. Because they were my sad little secret, a temporary fix for my loneliness. that I didn't want to look at in the light of day. But to him it was just more evidence of my master plan to deceive him. The argument wasn't a shouting match. It was low and vicious. I tried to defend myself, to explain the suffocating loneliness, to tell him how I felt like a ghost in my own life. I told him he checked out of our relationship the day he started that job. "You left me first," I yelled, tears finally streaming down my face. "You were just the first one to physically walk out the door. You left me alone in this house, in this life, years ago." He just shook his head, a grim little smile on his face. "Don't you dare try to pin this on me. Don't you dare make your cheating my fault." He didn't want an explanation. He didn't want to understand the why. He had the what, and that was all that mattered. He had the proof. He just needed the confession to seal his victory. He kept pushing, hammering me with questions, laying out his timeline of evidence. He had it all cataloged, my pathetic attempts at connection, laid bare like a case file. I was so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of lying, tired of trying to be seen by a man who was looking right through me. "Fine," I said the word, tasting like ash in my mouth. "You want to be right? You're right." I took a deep breath. I slept with him that night, in the car. And I talked to the other guy because for 5 minutes he made me feel like I still existed. There. Is that what you wanted to hear? The look on his face wasn't relief. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was satisfaction. The grim satisfaction of a man who knew he was right all along. He had won. He had proven I was the monster. The weeks since have been a special kind of hell. We live in the same house, but it feels like we're on different planets. We're polite for our daughter. We pass her back and forth with soft voices and dead eyes. We eat dinner at the same table in a silence so thick it feels like you could choke on it. He sleeps on the couch. Not because I kicked him out of the bed, but because it's a performance. It's his daily silent reminder that I am the one who broke us. A few days ago, he sat me down for a talk. He told me he wasn't going to leave. He said that leaving would be the easy way out. He said that the harder path, the right thing to do, is to stay together for our daughter. He wants to make it work. He said it with this air of nobility, like he was a martyr making the ultimate sacrifice. I almost laughed in his face. The harder path. The hard path would be looking at himself in the mirror and asking why the woman he supposedly loved felt so desperately alone that she blew up her own life just to feel something. The hard path would be admitting that he traded our partnership for a paycheck and a good night's sleep. The hard path would be acknowledging that our home felt broken long before I ever stepped foot in that bar. But he won't do that. That would mean admitting he had failed. Instead, he gets to be the hero. The good guy who is staying to clean up the mess the crazy cheating woman made. He gets to punish me every single day with his quiet disappointment and righteous presence. He thinks he's staying for our daughter, but he's not. He's staying because leaving would mean dismantling the perfect life he so carefully constructed. It would mean admitting that the foundation was rotten from the start. He's not staying for us. He's staying so he doesn't have to lose. He already won the argument. Now he gets to live in his victory. And my sentence is to live here with him. A constant reminder of how I failed him and how he magnanimously is choosing to endure it. But he's got it all wrong. He's not my keeper. He's just another ghost in a house that's been haunted for a very long time.
Story 3.
I know what my ex-wife told you. I'm the monster. The man who threw away a perfect family for a 20-year-old girl from church. I'm the guy who abandoned his kids, who moved his girlfriend into their home, who didn't even call his own daughter on her birthday. I've heard it all, and from the outside, I get it. It looks bad. Hell, it is bad. But a story is a funny thing. You only ever get the version the storyteller wants you to hear. You never hear about the silence. For years, that's all our house was filled with. Silence. Not a peaceful, comfortable silence. It was a loud, heavy silence that pressed down on you, a constant reminder of everything that wasn't being said. My wife Sarah and I were co-workers in the business of raising a family. We had a son and a daughter, a nice house in a good neighborhood, and a perfect attendance record at Sunday service. We were the image of a successful Christian family. A complete and utter fraud. Our conversations were about logistics. Can you pick up Maya from soccer? The electricity bill is due? Did you RSVP for the Miller's barbecue? We never talked about us. We never talked about me. I'd come home from a brutal day at work. A day spent making the money that paid for the nice house and the soccer lessons. And she'd look right through me. Her focus was a laser beam, and it was pointed squarely at the kids and the public image of our family. I was just a piece of the machinery. The part that went out and earned money, the hand that took out the trash, the driver. I tried. God, I tried. I'd ask about her day, and she'd give me a one-word answer before turning her attention back to homework or dinner prep. I'd try to touch her a hand on her back as she stood at the sink, and she'd stiffen like I was a stranger. We hadn't been intimate in years. I felt like a ghost in my own home, a walking wallet. The loneliness was an actual ache in my chest. You can be in a room full of people, in a house full of your own family, and be the most alone person in the world. Church made it worse. It was supposed to be a place of comfort, but for me, it was a stage. Every Sunday we'd put on our costumes, nice clothes, and bright fake smiles and perform. We'd sit in the pew, a perfect little unit, and I'd feel the eyes of the congregation on us. They saw a good man, a provider, a solid family. They didn't see the man who drove home from that very same church in complete silence with the woman sleeping in his bed. They didn't see a husband. They saw a prop. And I was so tired of playing the part. Then I met Chloe. It wasn't dramatic. It was a church picnic. I was manning the grill, a role I was always assigned, flipping burgers like an automaton. Everyone who came up to me talked about their order. 2 well done, 1 with cheese. Chloe came up and waited patiently. When it was her turn, she just smiled and said, "You look like you could use a break."
It was such a simple thing. But no one had said anything like that to me in a decade. She asked my name. Not "Aren't you Maya's dad," but my actual name? She asked what I did for a living, and when I told her, she asked if I enjoyed it. She asked what I liked to do for fun. The question actually stunned me. Fun? I didn't have fun. I worked, I paid bills, and I drove carpool. We started talking. Just little conversations after service, friendly emails during the week. It was like water in a desert. She saw times me, asterisk. The person, not the function. She laughed at my stupid jokes. She listened when I talked about how frustrating my job was. She made me feel like I was a real living person again, not just a fixture in someone else's life. The affair wasn't a plan. It was a slot. It started with coffee, then a lunch. Then one afternoon we were sitting in my car just talking, and I broke down. I told her everything. About the silence, the invisibility, the crushing weight of pretending to be happy. And she didn't judge me. She just listened. And then she held my hand. That was it. That simple human contact was the thing that broke the dam. It became my lifeline. The hours I spent with her were the only hours I felt real. It wasn't about hurting Sarah or my family. In my broken, desperate mind, it was about saving myself. It was the one part of my life that was mine, a secret world where I was wanted, where I was seen. I was so starved for affection that I became reckless. I let my guard down. We used an old email account Sarah and I had set up years ago for online shopping. A joint account we never really checked anymore. It felt safe, anonymous, a digital dead drop for messages and pictures. Pictures that made me feel desired for the first time in forever. It was stupid, I know that now. So unbelievably stupid. A rookie mistake from a man who was drowning and grabbing onto anything that floated. One Tuesday, I was at my desk at work, finishing up a report. It was a normal day. I had a phone call with a client, a meeting at 2 p.m., and I was supposed to pick up my son from practice at 5. I was going through the motions, just another day in the machine. Then a weird feeling washed over me. A cold, prickling dread. I couldn't place it at first. It was just a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. The pictures, the email. I had sent Chloe one just last night. Did I delete it? Did I log out? My hands started to shake. I quickly opened my browser and typed in the email login. I put in the password. Access denied. I tried again carefully. Access denied. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sarah never used that account, but she knew the password. Had she changed it? Why would she change it? My mind was racing. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I forgot the password. I clicked the forgot password link. A recovery link has been sent to s@email.com. Her personal email. My blood ran cold. I grabbed my phone to call her, to make up some excuse, any excuse. But before I could dial, I saw the notification on our shared family calendar app on my desktop.
A single simple entry she had just added for 3 p.m. that afternoon. It just said, "Call a lawyer." That drive home was the longest of my life. Every red light felt like an eternity. My phone stayed dark on the passenger seat. No angry text, no missed call. Just that calendar invite, cold and sterile. Call a lawyer. That's how she chose to tell me. Not with a scream, but with a scheduling update. It was so, Sarah. Efficient. Clean. Like scheduling a pest control appointment. I was the pest. When I walked in the door, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kids weren't there. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open. She didn't look up. "Where are the kids?" I asked. My voice sounded weak. "At my sister's," she said, her eyes still on the screen. I told her we needed to talk. I stood there waiting. She finally closed the laptop with a soft click and looked at me. There were no tears. Her face was like stone. "The joint email," she said. "The one for Amazon." I needed to find an old receipt. I saw the drafts. I saw everything. My whole defense, the years of loneliness, the feeling of being invisible, it all just died in my throat. What could I say? "I'm sorry you saw that"? It sounded pathetic. Instead, I just said the truth. "I was drowning, Sarah." She laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was a short, bitter sound. "Drowning! You were on vacation, while I was here raising your children, keeping your house, making sure everyone at church thought you were a good man. You were on vacation with a girl who is younger than my cousin." She finally stood up. "Don't you dare try to make this my fault. You're just a cliché. A pathetic middle-aged man who blew up his family for a 20-year-old? That was it. There was no discussion, no therapy, no path forward. She had already called the lawyer. I was packed and out of the house within an hour. The business of our marriage was over. Now it was just the business of our divorce. The next few weeks were a blur. I stayed on a friend's couch feeling like a complete failure. The whispers started at church. People would see me and turn away. I was a pariah. Chloe was the only person who would even look me in the eye. Sarah moved into an apartment with the kids, leaving the house empty. She couldn't stand to be there, and I couldn't stand being anywhere else. It was the only thing that felt like mine, even if it was just a shell filled with ghosts. So I did the thing everyone hates me for. I asked Chloe to move in. It wasn't a triumphant act. It was desperation. The silence in that house was now real, not just emotional, and it was deafening. I couldn't bear it. I needed to feel like I was building something, anything on the rubble. I know how it looked. Defiling the family home. It felt more like trying to perform CPR on my own life. I was trying to fill the emptiness with something. With someone who made me feel like I existed. But we couldn't stay. The town was suffocating us. The judgment was everywhere at the grocery store, the gas station, from people I'd known my whole life. My hometown was a few states away. My parents were there. It felt like the only place I could go to breathe again, to try to start over without the weight of everyone's hatred. I knew I had to tell Sarah in person. It was the hardest meeting of my life. I asked Chloe to come with me. I needed to show Sarah that this wasn't a temporary mistake. This was my new life. It was a cowardly move using her as a shield, but I felt like I needed one. We met at a sterile coffee shop. Sarah looked at Chloe with a contempt that could curdle milk, then turned her gaze to me. "We're moving," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Back to my hometown." She didn't flinch. "Fine. The kids stay here." "With me?" "I know," I said. It was the one thing I had already decided. What was the alternative? A brutal custody battle. Ripping them away from their school, their friends, their mother, to go live with their disgraced father and his new girlfriend. They deserved stability. They deserved a life that wasn't a constant war zone. In my mind, giving her full custody was the one responsible, decent thing I could do for them. It was my penance. "You'll pay support," she said. It wasn't a question. Of course. Whatever the court says. And that was it. We signed the papers. I signed away my daily life with my children. I convinced myself it was for their own good. The most loving thing a father could do was to remove his toxic presence from their lives. Then came Maya's birthday a few months later. It was her 10th. I bought a card and a present. I had it all wrapped and ready to mail. All day I stared at my phone. I knew I should call. I knew she'd be waiting for it. But I couldn't press the numbers. I pictured Sarah picking up. I could hear the venom in her voice. I imagined her telling Maya, "Your father is on the phone," with that tone, the one that said, "Times the man who abandoned us is calling asterisk." I pictured Maya's confusion and her pain caught in the crossfire. I convinced myself that my call would just be a disruption. A painful reminder. A weapon for Sarah to use against me and by extension against our daughter. So I did nothing. I sat there paralyzed by shame and fear, and told myself that silence was a kindness. That not calling was protecting her. It was the most twisted, cowardly piece of self-deception I have ever committed. It wasn't about protecting her. It was about protecting myself from the confrontation. I know I'm the villain in this story. I made selfish, destructive choices that hurt the people I was supposed to protect. I don't expect forgiveness. I wasn't a monster who woke up one day and decided to destroy his family for fun. I was a man who let his own quiet desperation lead him down a path that ended in wreckage. I traded a life where I felt invisible for a life where I'm hated. Some days I'm still not sure which is worse.
Story 4.
My ex-husband has probably told you his version of our story. He's good at telling stories. He likes to say our marriage was like a beautiful song. He talks about the high notes of our early years and the sad, slow parts when things got tough. It's a nice way to put it, I guess. It makes him sound romantic and tragic, but he always leaves out the most important part of any song, the silence. The rest. The space between the notes that lets the music breathe. Our music stopped breathing a long time ago. It probably started after the first move, but it died for good after the second one. We packed up our lives twice in 3 years for his career. The second time, we ended up thousands of miles from anyone we knew, from our families, from our home. He had his new job, a new challenge to pour himself into. The kids had a new school to get used to. What did I have? A new, unfamiliar grocery store and a whole lot of empty hours in a house that didn't feel like mine. Back home, I was a person. I was a musician. I played keyboard in a local band that was pretty decent. We had gigs. I had friends I'd known since high school. I had a life that was mine. In this new town, I was just his wife. I was just the kid's mom. My keyboard sat in a corner of the basement gathering dust. My whole identity got packed away in a box and was never opened again. The stress was huge for both of us. His new job wasn't as stable as we'd hoped, and we were always worried about money. But we handled the stress in completely different ways. I pulled inward. I got quiet. I felt like I was disappearing bit by bit every single day. He did the opposite. He clung to me. He needed me to be his rock, his cheerleader, his everything. He'd come home from work and just follow me around the house, talking about his day, his worries, needing constant reassurance that everything would be okay. I know that sounds like a husband loving his wife, but it wasn't. It was suffocating. It was like I was drowning in a calm, shallow pond, and he was the one holding my head under the water, whispering, "I love you," the whole time. He never once asked what was going on with me. When I was quiet, he'd say I was being moody or hard to live with. He saw my depression as a problem with my attitude, not as a desperate scream for help from a woman who didn't recognize herself in the mirror anymore. So I started trying to find that woman again. Small things at first. I started doing my makeup again. Really doing it. Not just a swipe of mascara. I bought a new dress not because we had anywhere to go, but just because it made me feel like an individual, not part of a unit. He didn't understand. He'd ask, "Who are you getting dressed up for?" The answer was so simple: me. I was doing it for me. It was the first selfish thing I'd done in years, and it felt like a tiny act of survival. Then I met someone. It was at my part-time office job, a boring gig I took, just to get out of the house. He was new, just like me. We started talking during coffee breaks. We talked about how weird the town was, how much we missed our old lives. He found out I was a musician, and his eyes lit up. He actually asked me about my band, what kind of music we played. He didn't see me as a mom or a wife. He saw me. Just me. My husband would call this the beginning of the affair, the pillow talk he found so suspicious. But it wasn't. It was friendship. It was two lonely people in a new place just talking. It was the first real conversation I felt I'd had in years one that wasn't about bills or the kids' report cards or how stressed my husband was. It was just a connection. Of course, the attraction came later. It grew out of that feeling of being seen. One afternoon we stayed late to finish a project, and we were the last two in the office. We were laughing about something our boss had said, and the laughter just kind of faded, and we were just looking at each other. He leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't planned. It wasn't some evil plot. It was a moment of total weakness, a single spark of warmth in the cold gray fog I was living in. And it felt incredible. It was wrong. I know it was wrong, but in that 1 second, I wasn't just a wife or a mom. I was a woman. I was desirable. I was alive. And it didn't stop with one kiss. Over the next couple of months, it happened again a few times. Stolen moments in the parking lot after work. It never went further than making out, but it was enough. It was my secret, my one thing that was just for me. The guilt was there, but it was buried under so much other baggage. One night, my husband and I were in bed. He initiated like he usually did. He was trying to connect, trying to get back to that beautiful music he thought we had. But as he touched me, all I could feel was the massive distance between us. I started to cry. Not quiet little tears, but real racking sobs. He stopped, obviously confused and hurt. He asked me what was wrong, if it was him. I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't even explain it to myself properly. It wasn't guilt over the other man. It was grief. I was mourning us. I was mourning the woman I used to be. The marriage I was in was already dead, and I was crying at its funeral. I tried to tell him something was wrong with me, that I felt lost and needed some space to figure things out. He heard space and immediately went into problem-solving mode. He suggested therapy, date nights, a vacation. He was trying to fix it to control it, which only made me feel more trapped. He couldn't just listen. We limped along like that for a few more weeks, heading into the holidays. I was a wreck inside, but on the outside, I put on the happy mom and wife mask. I wrapped presents, baked cookies, decorated the tree. I tried to convince myself that maybe we could get through this. That maybe this feeling would just go away. Christmas Eve was tense, but we made it. The kids were buzzing with excitement. We put out milk and cookies for Santa and tucked them into bed. My phone was almost dead, so I plugged it in on my husband's side of the bed and fell into an exhausted sleep, praying that for just one day we could pretend to be a normal, happy family. I woke up on Christmas morning to the sound of the kids laughing downstairs. For a second, everything felt normal. I rolled over and my husband wasn't in bed. I figured he was downstairs with them, starting the day. I smiled, thinking maybe we could pull this off. Maybe we could have one good day. Then I saw him. He was standing in the corner of the room by the dresser, holding my phone. His back was to me, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. My blood ran cold. He turned around slowly, and his face was like a ghost's. It was pale and empty. He just held up the phone and said, "Who is he?" There was no yelling, no screaming. It was so much worse than that. It was quiet and theatrical. In that moment on Christmas morning with our kids waiting for us downstairs, he didn't choose our family. He chose to break into my private world and confirm his worst fears. My first thought wasn't even about the affair. It was times you had no right asterisk. What followed was a blur of accusations and demands. He collapsed onto the floor, literally holding his head in his hands like he was in a movie. He kept saying our life was a lie, that I had destroyed everything. It didn't feel like real heartbreak. It felt like a performance designed to make me feel as small and as horrible as possible. He wanted me to grovel. He wanted me to beg for forgiveness. But all I felt was numb and trapped. He demanded to know everything, every detail, every word we ever said. It wasn't about understanding or healing. It was about gathering ammunition. It was about control. The next few weeks were a prison. He worked from home so he could watch me. He'd drive by my office building in the middle of the day for a surprise hug, which was just his way of checking up on me, of seeing if my car was there, of marking his territory. He needed my phone password, my email password. My life was no longer my own. It was a crime scene, and I was the prime suspect under constant surveillance. His need for reassurance, which had once felt suffocating, had turned into a full-blown interrogation that never ended. We tried therapy. It was his idea, another step in his fix-the-problem plan. We sat on a couch in a stranger's office, and he told his story of the perfect marriage destroyed by my betrayal. I just sat there quiet. The therapist was a nice woman. She listened patiently. And then she turned to me and asked a simple question that shattered everything. She said, "Putting all this aside for a moment, if you could wave a magic wand, is this marriage what you really want?" I couldn't answer. A real genuine yes wouldn't come out. I looked at my husband, at this man whose entire world now revolved around my mistake, and I realized I didn't know what I wanted. More than that, I didn't even know who I was anymore. How could I promise to fix a marriage when I didn't even recognize the woman who was in it? A week later, I asked him if we could pause the couples sessions so I could go on my own. I told him I needed to figure myself out before I could work on us. He took it as the ultimate betrayal. To him, me wanting to work on myself was just another way of saying I was giving up on him. The whole situation with my coworker was a nightmare. My husband demanded I cut him out of my life completely, instantly. But he was a key person on a major project I was managing. I couldn't just pretend he didn't exist without tanking my career, the one tiny piece of myself I had left. I tried to keep things strictly professional, limiting contact to emails and group meetings. It was awkward and stupid, and I handled it badly. Then came the happy hour. It was a team event I helped organize for a departing colleague. Of course, my coworker was going to be there. I didn't lie about it. I told my husband I had a work event. He found out later who was there, and he exploded. In his mind, it was proof. It was a secret romantic rendezvous that I had planned behind his back. It didn't matter that we were with a dozen other people. It didn't matter that I left early. To him, my betrayal was ongoing, and my every action was just more evidence. That was the last straw for him. A few nights later, he sat me down and gave me his ultimatum. "You end all contact or I'm moving out," he said. That means you find a new job if you have to. He has to be gone from your life completely. You choose. Him or me. He thought he was giving me a grand final chance to save our marriage. But listening to him, all I heard was the final power play. It wasn't about love or forgiveness. It was about obedience. It was about him winning. And in that moment, I knew I could quit my job, erase this man from my life, and devote every second to making my husband feel secure again. But I would never be trusted. I would never be my own person. I would always be the woman who had to be watched. I would spend the rest of my life paying for my mistake, living in his shadow, making sure the music never got louder than his single suffocating note of need. So I ended. Not for him, but for me. I sent a final professional text to my coworker explaining I could no longer have any contact and wished him the best. Then I told my husband it was over. Our marriage. Everything. I realized I could never heal as long as I was with him. The divorce isn't the tragedy he paints it to be. The real tragedy was the two people who got lost along the way. The man I married who used to see me, and the woman I used to be. Our marriage didn't die on Christmas morning. It died slowly over years of silent resentment and lost identity. His discovery of the text wasn't the cause of death. It was just the moment he finally signed the certificate. It was the sad, necessary end to a song that had gone off key a long, long time ago. Now, at least there's silence. And in that silence, I can finally start to hear my own music again.
Story 5.
I know what he wrote about. I read the whole thing, and I'm sure to anyone reading it I sound like the girlfriend from hell. A lying, cheating, gold-digging monster. And maybe I was. Maybe I became that person. But it didn't start that way, and he left out the parts that explain why. He painted a picture of a perfect guy and a crazy girl, but the truth is, we were just two people who broke each other. When we matched on Tinder, it felt like a lifeline. I was stuck in my tiny college town going to classes I didn't care about, living under my parents' roof with rules that made me feel like I was 16. My life felt small and gray. Then there was him. He lived in the city 100 miles away in a world that felt bright and full of possibilities. He was a graphic designer. He went to cool concerts. He talked about ideas I'd never even thought of. He was everything I wasn't. Our long-distance thing was perfect at first because it was an escape. A few times a month I'd drive down to see him, and for 48 hours I wasn't me. I was the cool, fun girlfriend from out of town. The girl who was worth the drive. That summer was the best time of my life. I basically moved in with him. I told my parents I was taking a summer class that required me to be on campus. A stupid lie that I had to keep track of all summer. But it was worth it. Waking up with him, exploring the city, feeling like a real adult for the first time, it was a fantasy. He called me his super awesome girlfriend, and I tried so hard to be that person. I poured every bit of myself into being the girl I thought he wanted. Happy, easygoing, adventurous. I was playing a part and I loved. I was so convinced that he was the one, that his perfect life could somehow pull me out of my own messy one. Then in July, my godmother died. It wasn't just sad. It was like a switch flipped in my brain and turned off all the lights. She was the one person in my family who really got times me. The grief was a physical thing. It felt like I was drowning. All the old problems I'd managed to bury came roaring back. The depression, the anxiety that made it hard to breathe, and my eating disorder, which had been quiet for almost a year, started screaming in my head again. The fantasy shattered. I wasn't the super awesome girlfriend anymore. I was just a wreck. His love, which used to feel like a warm blanket, suddenly felt like a spotlight. He was so healthy, so stable, so normal. He'd try to comfort me, to say the right things, but all I could feel was the massive distance between his put-together world and the absolute chaos in my head. I felt like an imposter in his apartment, in his life. Every time he looked at me with concern, I felt a wave of shame. He fell in love with the character I created, and she was gone. Now he was stuck with the real me. And I was sure it was only a matter of time before he saw how broken I was and ran. He came to visit me in my college town a few weeks after the funeral. I should have been happy to see him, but I was suffocating. I couldn't pretend. I couldn't smile. I spent most of the time in my room making excuses. He was trying so hard. And I was just this black hole of sadness. At one point, I hid in the bathroom and texted my best friend. "I wish he would just teleport away," I wrote. "I can't do this." He found those texts later, and I know how it sounded. It wasn't that I didn't want times him, asterisk. I just didn't want him to see times me times like that. I was so deeply ashamed of my own pain. Confessing to my friend that I was failing felt easier than admitting it to his face. He saw other texts too. Fragments of my spiraling thoughts that made no sense without context. A message comparing his stable love to the toxic up and down relationship I had with an ex. To him, it looked like I missed my ex. The truth. In my sick, depressed mind, that toxic love was the only kind I felt I deserved. I didn't feel worthy of someone good and kind. I even made a dumb, fleeting comment to a friend about his parents' money. It wasn't a plan. It was a pathetic fantasy of someone swooping in to save me from everything, from my life, from myself. It was stupid and ugly, but it wasn't real. They were just words typed in a moment of desperation. I started pushing him away subconsciously at first. I was so convinced he was going to leave me that I started making it happen. I needed to control it to prove myself right. If I made him leave, it wouldn't hurt as much as him figuring out on his own that I was too much. It worked. He broke up with me. He said I was distant, and that he felt like he couldn't make me happy. It ripped me apart, but a small dark part of my brain whispered, "I told you so." A few weeks later, we got back together. It was a mistake. It was a desperate last-ditch attempt to rewind time to get the fantasy back. But I was too far gone. My mental health was in the toilet. I started having nightmares and would talk in my sleep. A few times he told me I'd said another guy's name. It was mortifying. These weren't ex-boyfriends I was dreaming about. They were just random ghosts from my past names. that belonged to a time in my life when things were just as chaotic as they felt now. My brain was just misfiring, digging up junk from the attic. But I saw the look on his face. He was hurt. He was suspicious. I couldn't explain it because I didn't understand it myself. The end really started on his birthday. I had this whole plan. I was staying at his apartment and I was going to bake him his favorite cake from scratch. We were going to go to this nice dinner. I was going to be the perfect girlfriend again, just for one day. I woke up that morning and I couldn't move. It was like my body was filled with cement. You can't explain depressive paralysis to someone who's never felt it. It's not laziness. It's a total system shutdown. The sun was shining, he was in the other room, and all I could do was lie there staring at the ceiling, hating myself. Every minute that ticked by, the shame got heavier. By the time I finally dragged myself out of bed, it was 2 in the afternoon. The cake never got made. The special day was ruined. I felt like the most worthless person on the planet. I couldn't even look at him. The disappointment on his face was worse than if he had yelled at me. I packed my bag that night and told him I had to leave a day early, making up some lame excuse about needing to study. I just had to get out of there. Fleeing felt easier than trying to explain the unexplainable. The drive home was awful. I just cried the whole way, feeling like a complete failure. A few hours after I got back to my dorm, my phone rang. It was him. His voice wasn't sad or disappointed anymore. It was cold. Hard. "We need to talk," he said, and my stomach dropped. "And not another one of your half stories. I want the truth this time. All of it." There was a pause, and then he said the words that made the floor disappear from under me. "You can start by telling me why you were telling your friends you wished you were still with Mark." Mark. The name hung in the air for a second, and my mind went blank. For a crazy moment, I thought he was talking about one of the names I'd called out in my sleep. But he'd never mentioned a Mark. Then it hit me, a cold wave of nausea washing over me. Mark was my ex. From freshman year. A guy I hadn't spoken to in ages. But I had texted my friend about him. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I already knew. "Don't play dumb," he snapped. "I saw it. I saw everything. The text to Sarah, how you missed your ex, how you wished I'd teleport away, the jokes about my parents' money. All of it." The world tilted. It wasn't just the anger in his voice. It was the realization of how he knew. My laptop. I'd left it open at his apartment. My iMessage was logged in. He'd gone through my private conversations. He'd been spying on me. All the sadness, all the shame I'd been drowning in for months instantly curdled into rage. It was a clean, hot anger that burned everything else away. "You read my messages?" I said, my voice shaking. "You went through my private texts." "I had to. I knew something was wrong and you wouldn't tell me anything," he shot back. "You were lying to me, sleeping all day on my birthday, calling out other guys' names. What was I supposed to think?" "You were supposed to talk times to me. You were supposed to trust me," I was shouting, now pacing my tiny dorm room. You don't get to play detective and then act like you're the victim here. That's a disgusting violation of my privacy. Oh, so I'm the bad guy, he said, his voice dripping with disbelief. For finding out my girlfriend was telling her friends she wished she was with her ex. That is not what I said, I screamed. I tried to explain my words, tumbling over each other in a desperate, messy heap. I told him how my depression was twisting everything, how I felt so worthless, that I thought I only deserved a toxic relationship like the one I'd had with Mark, not his good, healthy love. I tried to explain that the money comment was a stupid, pathetic fantasy about being rescued because I felt like I was drowning. I tried to tell him that when I said I wanted him to teleport away, it was because I was so ashamed of the mess I'd become. Not because I didn't love him. It was useless. It all sounded like excuses. To him, the black and white text on the screen was the truth. My explanation was just another story. So your depression makes you miss your ex. Your depression makes you a gold digger. Is that what you're telling me? He asked, his tone mocking and cold. That was it. That was the moment I knew it was over. He wasn't listening. He had his evidence, his neat little folder of my failures, and he'd already found me guilty. He never saw a person who was hurting and needed help. He just saw a collection of red flags, a problem he needed to solve, and the solution was to get rid of me. My anger collapsed, leaving me empty. You know what, I said, my voice flat. Fine. You're right. I'm a terrible person. You caught me. We're done. Yeah, we are, he said. There was a pause. I think he expected me to cry or beg. I didn't have it in me. You know, the worst part of all this, I said quietly, is that I knew you'd leave me. I was so scared you'd see how broken I was and decide I wasn't worth it. I guess I should thank you. You spied on me. He twisted my words and proved my deepest, darkest fear about myself was right all along. You left me exactly like I always knew you would. I hung up before he could say another word. The aftermath wasn't a sudden crash, but a slow, quiet sinking. The breakup itself was painful, of course. I missed the guy from the beginning, the one I'd built a fantasy around. But that grief was completely overshadowed by the profound sense of betrayal. He hadn't just broken up with me. He had exposed me. He'd peered into the ugliest, most chaotic corners of my mind without my permission and used what he found as a weapon. My friends told me I dodged a bullet, that anyone who snoops like that is controlling and untrustworthy. Logically, I knew they were right. But emotionally, all I felt was the devastating confirmation of my own worthlessness. He had looked at my grief, my depression, my spiraling mental health, and he hadn't seen a partner in pain. He'd seen a liability. It took a long time to climb out of that hole. Therapy helped. Talking about my godmother, about the eating disorder, about the deep-seated insecurity that made me feel like I had to perform for love, I learned that my self-sabotage was a twisted way of protecting myself. If I orchestrated the failure, it couldn't surprise me. I know he thinks I was the villain of our story. He has the screenshots to prove it. And I own my part in it. I was a wreck. I was depressed, dishonest, and I pushed him away with both hands. I failed on his birthday. I lied about where I was. I understand why he saw what he saw. But he was never interested in the times why asterisk. He was only interested in the times what asterisk. He chose to be an investigator instead of... It happened the moment he opened my laptop looking for reasons to leave instead of reasons to stay. He found them, and in doing so, he became the very thing I was terrified of, the person who would confirm that I was too broken to be loved. And for that, I don't know if I can ever forgive him.
Story 6.
I know my ex-husband Alex is telling everyone I'm crazy. I'm sure he's having a field day with this, painting me as the jealous ex-wife who can't handle his new happy life. And maybe some of it looks that way from the outside. But nobody knows what I know. Nobody understands that I wasn't being jealous. I was being a mother. It's been 3 years since the divorce. 3 years of being a visitor in my own children's lives. Alex has primary custody of our 2 boys who are 6 and 4. I get them on weekends when I can. He makes it sound like I'm a flaky part-time mom always canceling for work. He has no idea what it's like to be the one who had to start over from scratch to claw my way up in a demanding job just to afford a tiny apartment for my sons to visit. He stayed in our house with our memories and just slotted someone new into my place. Her name is Chloe. She's 26. When Alex told me she was moving in, he said she was a natural with the boys and that she handles 50% of the child care. He said it like it was a good thing. Practical solution. To me, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. 50%. She gets to be 50% of their mother. She gets the scraped knees on a Tuesday, the bedtime stories on a Wednesday, the pancake breakfasts on a Thursday. I get scheduled weekends and the feeling that I'm slowly being erased from their lives. When I pick them up, they're always talking about her. Chloe took us to the park. Chloe made dinosaur nuggets. I smile and I nod and I tell them how fun that sounds, but inside I feel like I'm crumbling. I love my sons more than anything in this world, and I'm losing them to a stranger. For months I've had this feeling, this deep, cold knot in my stomach, that something wasn't right. It was all too perfect. Alex happy? The boys happy? The new fiancé perfect. It just felt wrong. Like a movie set where if you peeked behind a wall, you'd see it was all just painted cardboard. Last Thursday, that feeling got so much worse. I went to their house to pick them up for my weekend. Alex was on a work call in his home office and just waved me in without even getting up. Chloe was the one who answered the door. She was acting weird, kind of twitchy, and avoiding my eyes. She said she was cleaning the downstairs bathroom and asked if I could use the one upstairs. I just said sure and headed up, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Why was she so nervous? I walked into the master bathroom, our old bathroom, and the silence was deafening. I wasn't planning on snooping, I swear I wasn't. But something took over. It was that feeling, that mother's instinct screaming at me that something important was being kept from me. My hand was shaking as I reached out and opened the medicine cabinet. And there they were. Tucked behind some allergy medicine were 2 orange prescription bottles, both with her name on them. I didn't recognize the names of the medications, but they sounded serious. Clinical. Terrifying. My heart started pounding in my ears. This was it. This was the thing that was wrong. I knew it. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling, and took a quick, blurry picture of each label. I shut the cabinet, flushed the toilet for show, and went back downstairs to get my kids, my mind racing a million miles an hour. The whole drive to my apartment, I felt sick. Later that night, after I'd tucked the boys into bed, I finally pulled out my phone and zoomed in on the pictures. I typed the first drug name into Google. My blood went cold. Antipsychotic. I clicked on the link. It was used to treat schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, psychosis. It talked about side effects, about managing violent episodes and delusions. I looked up the second one. It was another similar drug sometimes used for severe treatment-resistant depression. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped my phone on the floor. This woman, this 26-year-old girl, who was 50% of their caregiver, was on heavy-duty psychiatric medication for conditions that could make her unstable, dangerous. And my ex-husband, the man I had trusted with my children's lives, never said a single word. He let her move in, let her be alone with them, let her put them to bed at night, all while keeping this massive critical secret from me. Any trust I had left for him completely evaporated in that moment. My weekend was a write-off. I told Alex I had to cut it short because of a big project at work. It was a lie. The real project was me trying not to completely fall apart. How was I supposed to play at the park and read bedtime stories when all I could picture were worst-case scenarios? I was consumed with a terror so deep it made me nauseous. I had to get them back there, but I couldn't just hand them over without some kind of protection. I felt totally powerless. Before I drove them back, I knew I had to do something. It was clumsy, I know it was, but I was desperate. I sat my 6-year-old down on my bed. Honey, I started trying to keep my voice from shaking. Mommy needs to tell you something very important, and it's our secret. Chloe, she has a sickness in her brain. Sometimes it can make people act different, or a little crazy. I need you to be very careful. If she ever says something or does something that scares you even a little bit, you have to tell me right away. Okay, you promise. He just nodded, his eyes wide. I felt awful, but I also felt like I was giving him the only armor I could. I was arming him with awareness because his father refused to. I dropped them off on Saturday evening, gave Alex the fake work excuse, and fled before I could start screaming at him. I spent all of Sunday just staring at my phone, my stomach in knots. I knew my son. He's not good at keeping secrets from his dad. I was just waiting for the fallout. Just after dinner, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with his name. Alex. I took a deep breath and answered. I didn't even get to say hello. What the hell did you say to our son? Alex's voice was a low growl, the kind he used when he was trying to control a rage. My own anger flared up, hot and immediate. I told him the truth. The truth you've been hiding from me. The truth? You went into my bathroom, you snooped through my fiancé's private medical information, and you terrified our 6-year-old. That's your version of the truth. She's on antipsychotics, Alex, I was yelling now, standing up from my couch and pacing the small living room. Do you have any idea how serious that is? You have a woman on heavy-duty psychiatric drugs watching our children? And you didn't think I had a right to know? He actually laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. Oh, I see. So you played Dr. Googled something you don't understand and decided she's a danger. This has nothing to do with you being jealous, right? Nothing to do with you trying to find a way to hurt her. The accusation felt like a slap. Jealous, Alex, this is about my children's safety. What if she has an episode? What if she gets violent? The things those drugs are for. Schizophrenia, psychosis. My God, are you even listening to yourself? I'm listening to you sound completely unhinged, he shot back. She sees a doctor. She's stable. She's an amazing person who loves our sons. And you, in one afternoon, try to poison our child against her because you can't stand that I've moved on. Every word was a twisting knife. He wasn't listening. He wasn't even considering my fear. He was just defending her, protecting her. He had already chosen his new family over the mother of his children. I felt a wave of despair so strong it almost buckled my knees. He was making me out to be the crazy one when her medicine cabinet was literally filled with proof that she was the one with the problem. You are so blinded by her you can't see anything else, I whispered. My voice thick with tears I refused to let fall. No, you're the one who's blind, he said, his voice dropping again, full of disgust. You're so wrapped up in your own bitterness you're willing to hurt our son to get at me. Don't ever do something like that again. Then his tone shifted, becoming cold and practical. And by the way, you took Leo's bag with all his daycare clothes. I need it back tomorrow. Something inside me just broke. The bag of clothes. It was such a small, stupid thing, but in that moment it felt like everything. It felt like him stripping away the last little pieces of my role as their mother. He was already replacing me with her for the day-to-day care, and now he was demanding back the supplies as if I was just an incompetent babysitter who'd forgotten to return the diaper bag. It was another piece of my old life, my old family being packed up and handed over to the new and improved model. You want the clothes, I screamed into the phone, the rage finally boiling over. Fine, I'll burn them. I'll set the whole bag on fire so you and your perfect new girlfriend can go buy him a whole new wardrobe for your perfect new life. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. Then, with a chilling finality, Alex said, You've lost your mind! He hung up. The click of the disconnected call echoed in the silent apartment. I stood there, phone in my hand, shaking from head to toe. Tears were streaming down my face, now hot and angry. He thought I was crazy. He was siding with a woman he barely knew over me, the mother of his sons. He was gaslighting me, turning my genuine, terrified concern into a jealous tantrum. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't listen to his accusations. I couldn't listen to him defend her. My thumb hovered over his contact information. I felt a sick mix of pain and relief as I pressed the button. Block! The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of a disconnected call. It was the silence of a severed connection. A door I had slammed shut myself. I sank onto my couch, curled into a ball, and just sobbed. I felt utterly and completely alone. But as the hours passed and the crying subsided, something else took its place. A cold, hard resolve. He wasn't going to protect them. He was too deep in it, too in love, or too stupid to see the risk right in front of his face. He called my fear jealousy. He called my warning an attack. He didn't see me as a concerned co-parent. He saw me as a problem to be managed. Well, I'm done being managed. I'm their mother. That title doesn't disappear just because he found a younger replacement. My maternal instinct isn't a form of insanity. It's the only thing that's seeing this situation clearly. He might have primary custody, but I have the primary responsibility to protect them from threats he refuses to see. He thinks I've lost my mind. He has no idea how far a mother will go when she believes her children are in danger. He thinks this is over. This is just the beginning.
Story 7.
I'm the wife. His wife. Well, his soon-to-be ex-wife. I'm sure by now you've all read his side of the story. I'm the monster who cheated the one who broke our family and traumatized our children. The villain. And I won't lie. I did a terrible, stupid, selfish thing. I had an affair for 7 months. That part is true. But if you think our marriage ended 7 months ago, you're wrong. Our marriage died a long, slow death over years, and he was the one who unplugged the life support long before I did. He probably told you we had a great marriage. And from his perspective, I guess we did. The house was clean, the bills were paid, the kids were happy and healthy. I managed the schedules, the school forms, the doctor's appointments. I was a good partner in the business of running our life. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being his wife and just became the household manager. He stopped seeing times me, asterisk. I would try to talk to him. I'd sit on the edge of the bed after the kids were asleep and try to tell him I was feeling lost, or that I was scared about getting older, or just some stupid story about my day. He'd be scrolling on his phone, half listening, and just say, or, that's tough. It was like talking to a wall. A polite wall, but a wall nonetheless. He'd get frustrated when I got upset. I'm not a mind reader, he'd say. I never asked him to be. I just asked him to listen, to look at me when I was talking, to be present. The loneliness was a physical thing. It was an ache in my chest when I'd see other couples holding hands. It was a pit in my stomach when I'd cook his favorite meal and he'd eat it in 10 minutes without a word before heading to the garage to work on some project. We lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, but we were miles apart. I felt like a ghost. I'd look in the mirror and wonder who the tired, invisible woman looking back at me was. He says he was happy. Of course he was. His life was running perfectly. He didn't notice the person running it was falling apart. Then came the affair. It's the part I know you're waiting for, the part that makes me unforgivable. It wasn't planned. I didn't go looking for it. It was a man at my work. He didn't look like a model or drive a fancy car. He just saw me. He'd ask about my weekend and actually wait for the answer. He laughed at my dumb jokes. One day I was wearing a new dress, nothing special, and he said, "You look really nice today." My husband hadn't said anything like that to me in 5 years. It was a drop of water in the desert, and I was so thirsty. It started with lunches and escalated. It was a horrible mistake, a selfish escape. For 7 months I lived 2 separate lives. In one life, I was a mom and a wife, packing lunches and going to soccer games, drowning in guilt. In the other, for a few hours a week, I was just a woman who someone wanted to talk to. I walled them off in my head. The affair was a fantasy, a symptom of the sickness in my marriage. My family, my home. That was my real life. I never, not for 1 second, wanted to leave my husband. I just wanted to feel something again. I thought I could keep it contained, that it was a mistake I would eventually end and deal with on my own. About 3 months ago, he started getting even more distant. I know it sounds impossible, but he did. He stopped even pretending to listen. He'd come home from work and just go straight to his room or leave the house altogether. His answers became one word. Fine, okay, nothing. At first, I barely even noticed. It was just a slightly colder version of the cold I was already used to. I told myself he was just stressed with work. It's easier to believe your husband is stressed than to believe he doesn't love you anymore. Then I saw the bills. I was cleaning off the kitchen counter, sorting through a pile of mail he'd left there, and I saw it. An envelope from a law firm. I recognized the name from billboards around town. Under the name in small print, it said, "Family Law and Divorce Attorneys." My blood ran cold. My hands started shaking. I stood there for a full minute just staring at it, my heart pounding in my ears. But the denial is strong when the truth is too awful to handle. Asterisk. It's for his business times, I told myself. Asterisk, he's helping his parents with their will. It could be anything. It's not for us. Asterisk. I pushed it back into the pile and tried to forget I ever saw it. The real warning shot came last week. It was a Saturday. I was in the living room and he called the kids over to the sofa. I was in the same room, maybe 10 feet away. I thought he was going to talk to them about their chores or something. But his voice was different. Serious. He looked at our son and our daughter and said so calmly, "You know, your mom and I love you very much. But sometimes grown-ups can't be together anymore." The world stopped. I felt all the air get sucked out of my lungs. I was frozen. He was saying this times in front of me, times like I wasn't even there. My mind was screaming. Asterisk. "What are you doing? Stop! Don't say this to them," times, but not a sound came out of my mouth. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My silence wasn't me agreeing. It was paralysis. It was the absolute terror of a deer staring into the headlights of a truck. But even then, even after that, my stupid, hopeful brain twisted it. I thought times, okay, this is it. This is his warning. He knows something or he suspects. He's showing me how serious this is. He's telling me we have to fix this now or this is what happens. Asterisk. I spent the next few days in a panic, deciding how I would end the affair, how I would confess everything, how I would beg him to go to counseling with me. I was ready to do anything to save us. I thought this was our rock bottom, the crisis we needed to finally wake up and fight for our marriage. I was preparing for the biggest, ugliest, most important fight of my life. He came home that night and I had my speech ready. My stomach was in knots. I was ready for him to yell, to scream, to cry. I was ready for a war. He walked through the door, put his keys on the counter, and turned to me. He was grinning. Not a small smile, but a wide, happy, relieved grin that reached his eyes. It was a look I hadn't seen on his face in years. And it was the single most terrifying thing I have ever seen. That grin. I will see that grin in my nightmares until the day I die. It wasn't the sad, pained smile of a man trying to be brave. It was genuine. He looked happy, truly, deeply happy. Like he'd just gotten a promotion or won the lottery. And in that moment I knew the fight I had been preparing for was already over. I had lost before it even began. "We need to talk," he said, his voice light and airy. He gestured to the sofa, the same sofa where he had just told our children their family was breaking apart. I sat down like a robot, my limbs stiff, my prepared speech dissolving into ash in my mouth. He didn't sit next to me. He sat in the armchair opposite me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees like this was some kind of friendly business meeting. "So I know," he said, still with that horrifying calm. "I've known for a while. About you and him." My world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from my face. I opened my mouth to say something to deny, to explain, to apologize, but he held up a hand. "Don't." "It's okay," he said. Asterisk. It's okay times. Honestly, it just made things clearer for me. I've been checked out for a long time, and this was the permission I needed, I guess, to finally be done. He said it all so simply, so matter-of-factly. He wasn't heartbroken. He wasn't angry. He sounded relieved. And that's what broke me. The wall in my mind, the one that kept my stupid affair separate from my real life, didn't just crack. It exploded. The fantasy wasn't a separate, harmless thing. It was the bullet I had loaded into the gun myself and handed to him. "What? What are you saying?" I stammered my voice, a pathetic whisper. "I'm saying I want a divorce," he said. And the grin came back smaller this time, but still there. "It's time. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to start dating again. Be happy." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "I've actually reconnected with someone. Monica. From my old hometown. You might remember her. We've been talking a lot. It's been nice. Monica. An old acquaintance. He hadn't just been detaching. He had been building a new bridge while letting ours crumble into the sea. He had mourned our marriage in private months ago and moved on while I was still trying to patch the leaks. The lawyer's bills the distance, telling the kids it wasn't a warning. It was an execution plan. And I was the last to know. That's when the screaming started. It wasn't a choice. It was a sound that tore its way out of my throat, raw and animalistic. The carefully contained woman who ran the household and packed the lunches was gone, and in her place was just pure primal agony. "No!" I cried, stumbling to my knees in front of him. I grabbed his legs, my nails digging into his jeans. "No, please don't do this. I'm sorry. I'll end it. I'll do anything. Please don't leave me. Don't do this to our family." The tears were blinding me. Snot was running down my face. I was a pathetic, groveling mess on the floor, begging for the life I had just realized I'd thrown away. I was begging for the man who hadn't really been there for years, but whose absence now felt like a physical amputation. This wasn't an act. This was the real me. The terrified, stupid woman underneath. Finally understanding the catastrophic price of trying to feel seen. He didn't move. He just looked down at me, and his face was no longer happy. It was cold, annoyed. He saw my breakdown not as the genuine shattering of a soul, but as a manipulative tactic. A final desperate attempt to get my way. "Stop it," he said, his voice sharp. "Just stop. It's too late for this." He tried to pull his legs away, but I held on tighter, sobbing, making incoherent promises. I would change. I would fix myself. We could go to counseling. We could fix this. He saw he wasn't getting through to me. He pulled out his phone. I thought he was going to call the police, and a new wave of horror washed over me. But he just dialed a number and put the phone to his ear. He looked at me with disgust as I wept at his feet. "Hey, Sarah," he said into the phone. He was calling my sister. "Yeah, it's me. I need you to come over. Now. She's not taking it well. You need to come and get her." He hung up. He looked back down at me. "Your sister is on her way." And with that, he stood up, dislodging my hands, and walked out of the room. He went into the garage, and a few moments later, I heard the door open and his car start. He just left. He left me in a heap on the floor of our living room. A broken thing to be collected by someone else. I don't know how long I lay there choking on my own sobs. The silence of the house was different. It wasn't the lonely silence of a quiet evening anymore. It was the dead silence of a tomb. My tomb. The home I had poured my heart into for 15 years suddenly felt alien, like I was a trespasser. Every family photo on the wall was a judgment. Every one of my kids' drawings on the fridge was a reminder of the perfect family I had just detonated. When my sister's headlights cut across the living room window, a deep, hollow shame settled in my gut. She walked in using her spare key and found me right where he'd left me. She didn't say a word. She just knelt down, wrapped her arms around me, and helped me stand. As she led me out the door of my own home, I took one last look back. It was just a house now. The love was gone. I had been looking for a spark, a moment of noise in the silence, and in my search I had burned the whole thing to the ground. He might have lit the final match, but I was the one who had spent months soaking the floors in gasoline.
Story 8.
My husband, 40M, found messages on my 36F phone, and I think he's ready to divorce me. He thinks he's discovered the source of all our problems. He thinks he caught the bad guy. What he doesn't get is that what he found isn't the sickness. It's a symptom of a disease he gave me, and I don't know how to explain that without sounding like I'm just making excuses for what I did. We've been together for 10 years, married for 6. For most of that time, he was my person. My best friend. The man who would listen to my stupid stories about work, who would grab my hand just because, who looked at me like I was the only person in the room. I'm not some cheater who got bored. I'm a woman who was married to a ghost for a solid year, and it broke me. It all started when he took that new job. He sold it to me as this great opportunity for our family, for our future. More money, more prestige. He promised it wouldn't change things. That was a lie. The job didn't just take his time. It took his soul. He'd leave before I was even properly awake, and come home long after our kid was in bed. When I did see him, he was just a shell. A body on the couch, scrolling through his work email, his face lit up by the screen, but his eyes completely blank. Our life together became a series of logistical text messages. Can you pick up milk dentist appointment for the kid is Tuesday at 3. Don't forget to pay the electric bill. We stopped talking. I mean really talking. I'd try to tell him about my day, and his eyes would glaze over. He'd nod and say, "Aha," but he wasn't there. He was in a meeting in a spreadsheet anywhere but in our living room with me. Intimacy was the first thing to die. It wasn't a slow fade. It was like a switch was flipped. He was too tired, too stressed. I stopped trying to initiate because the rejection felt worse than the loneliness. I started to feel invisible. I was a household appliance. The mom, the cook, the bill payer. But I wasn't his wife anymore. I wasn't a woman he desired. I was just part of the furniture. I can't tell you how many nights I cried myself to sleep next to him while he was passed out smelling like stale coffee and stress. I tried to fix it. I really did. This past January, I hit a wall. I couldn't take the silence anymore. I sat him down one evening and just laid it out there. I told him I was drowning. I said, "We are in serious trouble. I feel like I don't even know you anymore, and I'm so lonely it hurts." I told him there was so much more I needed to say, so much hurt I was holding on to, but that I couldn't do it here in our kitchen, where it would just turn into another fight he was too tired to have. I told him the only way I would unpack everything was in marriage counseling. I needed a neutral space. I needed a professional there to help us translate because we clearly weren't speaking the same language anymore. He looked shocked, then he looked tired. He agreed, but he dragged his feet. It was another thing on his to-do list that he'd get to eventually. It took me weeks of nagging and pushing just to get him to look at the list of therapists I'd sent him. In that waiting period, the loneliness got worse. It was a physical ache in my chest, and that's when my friends started messaging me more. It wasn't planned. He's just a friend, someone I've known for years. He knew things were bad with my husband. He started just by checking in. How are you holding up? And unlike my husband, he actually waited for the answer. For the first time in forever, someone was listening. The text became my escape. It started out as joking, then it turned into flirting. We started building this little fantasy world just for us. It was all text. Nothing ever happened in real life, and I never wanted it to. It was a story. And in that story, I wasn't the tired, invisible mom. I was exciting. I was desired. He paid attention to me. The dom, sub, stuff. I know how that sounds. But in my real life, I had absolutely no power. I was begging my husband for scraps of attention, managing a household by myself, watching my marriage crumble with zero control to stop it. In our texts, I could pretend to be in charge, or I could pretend to give up control to someone who actually wanted it. It was a game. It was a pressure valve that kept my head from exploding. It was pathetic maybe, but it was all I had. We finally had our first counseling session scheduled. I actually felt a tiny flicker of hope. I thought finally we can start fixing this. I can finally explain everything. Then came that night. We were eating dinner, another silent meal under the hum of the refrigerator. The tension was so thick you could taste it. I got up to get a glass of water, my mind just buzzing with exhaustion and anxiety about our upcoming appointment. I left my phone on the table, screen side up. I didn't even think about it. It was an unlocked, loaded gun, and I just left it there. I was only gone for a minute. When I came back into the dining room, he wasn't eating. He was just sitting there completely still, staring at my phone, which was now in his hand. He slowly lifted his head, and the look on his face, it wasn't anger, not yet. It was a quiet, chilling kind of devastation. The kind that comes right before the hurricane makes landfall. He knew. And I knew that he knew. In that moment, the entire world just stopped. He didn't say a word. He just placed the phone back on the table, screen down with a quiet finality, like he was closing a coffin lid. He pushed his chair back, stood up, and walked out of the room. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. The silence he left behind was 100 times worse than any scream. I sat there, frozen my heart, hammering against my ribs so hard I thought I might be sick. I couldn't breathe. That was the longest night of my life, lying in bed next to a man who had become a complete stranger, both of us, pretending to be asleep, the air crackling with everything we weren't saying. The next few days were a special kind of hell. We moved around each other like ghosts in our own home, the space between us charged with electricity. We still did the parenting dance, handing off our child coordinating schedules via tight-lipped one-word answers. but the fake politeness was gone. It was replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. Every time he looked at me, I could feel the weight of his judgment. He was looking at a cheater, a liar. He wasn't looking at his wife, the woman who had spent a year trying to get his attention. The hope I had for our therapy session was shriveling up and dying. I had wanted that room to be a place where I could finally open the wound of my loneliness. Now I knew it was going to be a courtroom, and I was already on trial. The confrontation came the day before our first appointment. I was in the kitchen staring into the fridge, trying to figure out what to make for dinner when he came in and stood behind me. He didn't get close, just blocked the exit. I closed the fridge door and turned around slowly. His face was a mask of cold, controlled anger. "Before we go talk to this stranger tomorrow," he said, his voice dangerously low, "I need you to answer one question for me. Just one. Is there someone else?" And that's when I broke. All the pain, the frustration, the shame, and the screaming loneliness of the past year just erupted out of me. It wasn't a clean, dignified cry. It was a messy, ugly, hysterical blow-up. "Someone else!" I almost shrieked the words, tumbling out over each other. "Is that what you think this is about? After a year of you looking through me like I'm glass, after months of me begging you to see that we were falling apart, you think the problem is someone else?" I was sobbing, trying to get the words out, trying to make him understand. "You weren't here. You were gone. I was talking to myself in this house for a year. That phone, that stupid fantasy on a screen, that was me trying not to go crazy from the silence you left me in. It wasn't real. You were the one who was supposed to be real." He just stood there, his jaw clenched, unmoved. He didn't hear a word I said. He heard the confession he was looking for. He heard me admit that the messages were real, and that was all that mattered. He saw my hysteria not as a sign of my deep pain, but as the guilt of someone who'd been caught. He shook his head slightly, a look of profound disgust on his face, and walked away. My last chance to explain myself before therapy, the path I had imagined, was gone. He had short-circuited it all with a single question. Our first therapy session was exactly what I had feared. It wasn't a mediation, it was an ambush. Our therapist, a kind-looking woman with patient eyes, tried to start by asking us about our goals, about the history of our relationship. I started to talk about the disconnect, about the job, about the loneliness. But he couldn't wait. He cut me off. "She's been sexting someone," he said the words, dropping like stones into the quiet room. "A friend? Some dumb sub thing? I found the messages on her phone." The therapist looked at me, her expression neutral, but I could feel the entire focus of the room shift. The narrative was set. He was the victim, I was the villain. The last year of his neglect, his absence, his emotional abandonment, it all just evaporated. Became background noise. The main event. The only thing that mattered now was my betrayal. I spent the rest of the hour trying to explain that the sexting was a symptom, not the disease. But I could hear how my words sounded. They sounded like excuses, pathetic justifications from a cheating wife. To his credit, something must have gotten through. Maybe it was the therapist. Maybe it was the last desperate shreds of my blow-up in the kitchen. A week after that first session, he came home and told me he'd quit his job. He said he'd found a new one, something with normal hours, less travel. He said it like he was offering me a peace treaty, like this was the grand gesture that would fix everything. A year ago, I would have cried with relief. I would have thrown my arms around him. But now it just felt tainted. He wasn't quitting the job because I had told him I was drowning. He was quitting because he thought his wife was a slut who couldn't be trusted alone. He was doing it to fix me, not to fix us. We're still going to counseling. He started the new job. He's physically home more. But the ghost of him has been replaced by something worse, a warden. He's watchful. He doesn't trust me. Every time I pick up my phone, I can feel his eyes on me. The intimacy is still gone, but now it's been replaced by a deep, chilling suspicion. I feel like I'm trapped in a nightmare of my own making. I did a stupid, desperate thing to cope with a problem, and in the process, I gave my husband a weapon to use against me forever. I gave him a simple explanation for our complicated mess. Now he doesn't have to look at his own part in it. He doesn't have to face the fact that he abandoned this marriage long before I ever sent a single text. He thinks he's discovered the reason our marriage failed. He has no idea he's holding a photo of the crash, completely ignoring the miles of broken road that led to it. And I'm terrified we'll never be able to go back and fix it. I'm terrified he'll never see me again, only the monster he thinks he found on my phone. Story 9. I know what my husband told you. I know the story he's painting of me. The cheating wife. The monster who destroyed our family. I'm not here to tell you I didn't do it. I did. I own every single ugly part of that. But if you only hear his side, you're reading the last chapter of a book and pretending you know the whole story. The truth is, I cheated to escape a man who had already buried me alive. For 11 years, our marriage wasn't a partnership. It was a project he managed. My husband, let's call him Mark, is a master of efficiency. Our life was a spreadsheet. Finances were optimized. Vacations were scheduled a year in advance. Even our morning hugs felt like they were on a to-do list. 8:15 a.m. hug wife. Check. He'd say I was a great wife and an excellent mother, the way a manager praises a reliable employee. They weren't compliments. They were performance reviews. I was a functional component in the perfect life he had built. I played my part. I raised our beautiful twin boys. I kept the house perfect. I smiled at his work dinners. I was good at it. But then, about a year ago, I was laid off. My career wasn't just a job. It was the one corner of the world that was mine. It was my name on a project, my ideas in a meeting. It was my proof that I existed as something other than Mark's wife or the boy's mom. And just like that, it was gone. I was completely adrift. I'd sit in the quiet house after dropping the kids at school and feel this crushing silence. When I tried to talk to Mark about it, he saw it as a logistical problem. It's fine. I make enough for all of us, he'd say, patting my shoulder before turning back to his laptop. He thought the problem was money. He didn't understand that the gaping hole in my chest had nothing to do with our bank account. My identity had been erased, and he didn't even notice it was missing. The numbness set in. I went through the motions every day. Wake up, get the kids ready, clean, cook, wait for Mark, smile, go to sleep. He later said he watched my nightly routine and saw a calm, happy wife. He didn't see a calm woman. He saw the autopilot of a person who had completely checked out. I was a ghost in my own home. Then I ran into an old colleague. Let's call him David. We got coffee, and it was like a jolt of electricity. He didn't ask about the kids or what I was making for dinner. He asked about my old projects. He said, I still tell people about that presentation you gave back in 18. You were brilliant. He saw me, the person I used to be, the person I had forgotten. My best friend Beth saw the change in me after that coffee. I was alive again. You look happier than I've seen you in years, she told me. When I confessed how lost I felt, how invisible I was in my own marriage, she just squeezed my hand. You deserve to feel something, she said. Anything. She was right. So David and I had lunch. It was just a lunch. A stolen hour of feeling like myself. But that feeling, that validation was like a drug. He listened. He laughed at my jokes. He made me feel interesting and desired. It wasn't about love, not really. It was about chaos. It was the one thing in my life that Mark couldn't schedule, couldn't control, couldn't optimize. One lunch turned into another. And then, one day, that lunch ended at a cheap, seedy motel just off the highway. I know how that sounds. It was ugly and desperate. But it was times mine asterisk. Every whispered message, every lie I told to get out of the house, it was a choice I was making for myself. I was so tired of being good, of being the perfect, predictable wife. For an hour or two in that dingy room, I was something else. I even brought Beth to one of our lunches. It was a stupid, clumsy attempt to normalize it in my own head. See, we're just friends catching up. And look, my best friend is here too. Of course, she saw it. She saw the way I looked at him, the electricity between us. She pulled me aside in the bathroom and told me I was playing with fire. I knew she was right, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. I needed to get burned. Coming home after was the hardest part. It was like putting on a costume. I'd walk in, drop a bag of burgers on the counter for dinner, and switch back into mom. I'd help the boys with their homework, tuck them into bed, and listen to Mark talk about his day. He said later that he never suspected a thing because I acted as if nothing happened. He's right. I did. But he was the one who hadn't truly seen me in years. That calm he saw wasn't shamelessness. It was the practiced mask of a woman who had been drowning in plain sight for a decade. The end came on a Sunday. I was at my parents' house with my sister and her kids. It was a normal family dinner, loud, messy, full of laughter. For a few hours, I almost felt normal. Then my phone rang. It was Mark. His voice was flat. cold. "Hey, are you at your mom's?" "Yeah, we just finished eating." "What's up?" "Don't come home just yet. Just stay there for a little while. I'll call you later." "Is everything okay?" I asked, a knot tightening in my stomach. "Everything's fine," he said in a tone that meant the exact opposite. He hung up before I could ask anything else. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't. An hour went by. Then another. The sky outside was getting dark. My mom was cleaning up the kitchen and my dad was watching the game with my brother-in-law. I was sitting on the couch staring at my phone when the doorbell rang. My dad grumbled about unexpected visitors and went to the door. I could hear him talking to someone, his voice low and confused. My mom came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Who is it, honey?" she called out. I stood up and walked toward the hallway, my heart starting to pound against my ribs. I saw my dad standing in the open doorway holding a large manila envelope. Standing on the porch was a man in a cheap suit I'd never seen before. He wasn't looking at my dad. He was looking past him right at me. He gave a small professional nod, turned, and walked back to his car. "What is that?" my mom asked, walking up behind my dad. My father turned around slowly, his face pale. He looked from the envelope in his hands, then up at me. His eyes were filled with a kind of confusion and horror I'd never seen before. He held it out to me without a word. My name was typed neatly on the front. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely open the envelope. Inside the first page was a cold, formal, legal document. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My breath left my body in a rush. I sank onto the edge of the couch, the papers shaking in my lap. My mom started crying a soft, wounded sound. My dad just stood there, his face like stone, looking at me as if I were a complete stranger. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot wave that washed over my entire body. Mark hadn't just ended our marriage. He had executed it. In front of my family. He wanted them to be the first to see what I'd done to make sure I had nowhere to run for comfort. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I wasn't just driving toward a confrontation. I was driving toward a verdict that had already been decided. This wasn't the act of a man lashing out in pain. This was the opening move of a strategist. Every red light felt like an eternity. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my heart was a cold, heavy lump in my chest. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside and the first thing I saw were the trash bags. Not one or two. At least a dozen huge black industrial bags lined the hallway. They were bulging. I reached out and touched one. Through the thin plastic, I could feel the hard corner of a picture frame. I tore a small hole in the bag. Inside, I saw the edge of a scrapbook I had spent months making for the boys, filled with pictures from their first 5 years. In another bag, I saw the quilt my grandmother had made for me, my wedding dress, photo albums. Every personal trinket, every sentimental object, every piece of my life that wasn't shared furniture was stuffed into these bags like garbage. He was sending a clear message: you are disposable. I found him in his office. He was sitting at his desk perfectly calm, as if waiting for a business meeting to start. There were no tears, no red-rimmed eyes. Just a chilling stillness. "Mark," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't look up at me. He just gestured to the chair opposite his desk. I sat down. It felt like I was in a police interrogation. He slid a thick, professional-looking binder across the desk. A file. "I hired someone," he said, his voice completely flat. "I wanted to be sure." I opened it. The first page was a photo of me and David laughing at a restaurant table. My friend Beth was there smiling, caught mid-sentence. Then a picture of my car pulling into the motel parking lot. A picture of us walking toward one of the rooms. There were dates, times, even receipts. It was a meticulous, soulless log of my betrayal. My stomach churned. He wasn't a husband confronting his wife. He was a prosecutor presenting his case. Then he reached over and pressed a button on a small digital recorder on his desk. My own voice filled the silent room. A soft laugh, then a whisper. Then David's voice. I heard sounds I never ever thought another human being would hear. Intimate sounds. Sounds from that cheap, ugly motel room. Sounds that were private, desperate, and mine. He made me listen to it. He watched my face as the color drained from it as I started to shake uncontrollably. It was a violation so profound, so utterly dehumanizing, that it took my breath away. He wasn't just hurt. He wanted to annihilate me. When he finally turned it off, the silence was deafening. "Is there anyone else?" he asked, his eyes still cold and analytical. The question wasn't a search for truth. I could see it. He was just checking for more ammunition, more data points for his file. It was a final dismissive flick, a way to tell me he assumed I was rotten to the core. "No," I choked out. "Just him." He nodded, as if ticking off a box. Good to know. Then he leaned forward, and for the first time a flicker of something that wasn't coldness appeared in his eyes. It was something harder. "You will not fight me on custody. You will agree to 50 over 50, and you will not say a single bad word about me to our sons. If you do this, file," he tapped the binder, "becomes public record in our divorce proceedings. Their teachers, our friends, every parent at their school will know exactly what their mother is. Do you understand me?" That's when I finally saw him. The man I'd been married to for over a decade. This wasn't about a broken heart. It was about power. I had disrupted his perfect controlled world. I had introduced a variable he hadn't accounted for. And the punishment had to be absolute. I had broken his rules. I stood up my legs, feeling like they might give out. "What about David's wife?" I asked, a sick feeling washing over me. "She's pregnant, Mark." He looked at me, and a small, tight smile touched his lips. It was the cruelest expression I had ever seen. "Oh, I know. I went to see her this afternoon, just before the papers were served to you. I felt she had a right to know. I gave her a copy of the file. That was it. That was the moment that broke me. This wasn't about healing or closure or protecting his family. This was a victory lap. He didn't just need to punish me. He needed to burn down everything I had touched. Ruining that pregnant woman's life was just collateral damage in his perfectly executed war. I left that night with nothing but a suitcase of clothes and 2 of the trash bags he had so carefully packed for me. My life reduced to garbage. The weeks that followed were a blur of lawyers and painful conversations. I had to sit down with our 9-year-old boys and explain in the simplest terms I could that Mommy and Daddy weren't going to live together anymore. Seeing the confusion and hurt in their eyes was a punishment worse than any audio recording. I know what I did. I cheated. That is a truth I have to live with every single day. I own the lies, the selfishness, the hurt I caused. I'm not asking for pity, but I need you to understand. I didn't break the heart of a loving man who adored his wife. I broke the rules of a cold and methodical warden who was angry that one of his assets had malfunctioned. My affair was a desperate, reckless, and wrong attempt to feel alive. His response was a calculated, cruel, and systematic campaign to destroy me. He didn't just want to divorce me. He wanted to erase me.
Story Teen.
I'm sure, in his version of the story, I'm the villain. The cold, cheating girlfriend who threw away 6 years for no reason. And maybe I am. Maybe there's no excuse for what I did. But the story didn't start the night he found out. It started years before, in the silence that filled our apartment. We met when we were 19. We were kids, basically. We moved in together a year later, adopted 2 dogs, and started playing house. It was fun. It was exciting. We were building a life. But somewhere along the line, the game ended and we were just there. Living in the same space, sharing the same bills, but not sharing a life anymore. The person I fell in love with, the one who couldn't keep his hands off me and would talk to me for hours about nothing, he just sort of disappeared. He was replaced by a quiet, predictable roommate who sat on the other end of the couch, scrolling on his phone. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't a comfortable, peaceful silence. It was heavy. It was the sound of everything unsaid, every problem we were ignoring. I tried to talk to him so many times. I'd say I feel like we're just roommates, or I feel really lonely even when you're right here. He'd look up from his phone, give me this tired look, and say, I know. I'm working on it. But working on it was never real effort. It was him trying to check boxes off a list. One time, after a big talk where I cried and told him I felt invisible, he scheduled a date night for the following Friday. He made a reservation and everything. But the whole dinner he was quiet. He asked about my day like he was my boss doing a performance review. There was no spark, no connection. It felt like a chore he had to complete. He'd buy me flowers after an argument, or give me a compliment that sounded like he'd read it from a script. He was putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. He didn't see that I wasn't asking for a date night. I was asking for him. I was drowning. And he was telling me he'd get me a glass of water later. I felt so powerless in my own home. My life was this boring, stagnant routine, and I felt like a piece of the furniture. So I did something for myself. I joined a gym. It sounds cliche, I know. But I needed a place to go where my only goal was to be stronger. I needed to feel in control of something, and my own body was the only thing left. That's where I met him. My trainer. Let's call him Alex. Alex was the first person in years who actually saw me. Not Mark's girlfriend of 6 years, not the other half of a couple, just me. He noticed when I pushed myself to lift a little heavier. He'd say your form was perfect on that last set. He listened when I babbled about my stressful day at work. He'd laugh at my stupid jokes, a real genuine laugh. It was just attention. That's all it was at first, but I was starving for it. I was so desperate for someone to look at me and see a person, not an obligation. The Instagram DMs started innocently. He sent me a link to a video on workout form. I sent him a meme about leg day. It was friendly. Then it started to change. He'd ask how my weekend was. I'd tell him it was boring, just me and Mark on the couch, not talking. He'd say, "That's a waste of a fun person." No one had called me a fun person in years. Soon we were talking every day. All day. I'd be at my desk at work, smiling at my phone like an idiot. He made me feel smart and funny and beautiful. He made me feel wanted. I had completely forgotten what that felt like. The good morning texts became the best part of my day. The good night texts were the last thing I saw before I fell asleep. I knew it was wrong. Of course I did. But I built a wall around it in my head. This wasn't my real life, I told myself. My real life was the silent apartment, the 2 dogs, the roommate who used to be my boyfriend. The DMs with Alex were a fantasy world, a secret garden I could run away to when the quiet at home got too loud to bear. Then he asked for a picture. Not a gym selfie, a real picture. I sent one and he replied, "You're so beautiful." My heart did a thing it hadn't done in forever. It wasn't long before the sexting started. And the pictures. I never thought I would be that person. The girl sending nudes to a man who wasn't her boyfriend. But it was intoxicating. In that fantasy world I was desired. I was the main character. It was a powerful feeling after years of being a background prop. I kept telling myself it didn't really count. It wasn't physical. We never met up outside the gym. We never even kissed. It was just words and pictures on a screen. It was a coping mechanism, a way to survive until things with Mark got better. I was so stupid to think they ever would. Last night was a typical Tuesday. I went to the gym after work. Alex was there, and the way he smiled at me from across the room made me feel warm all over. I came home buzzing. I'd had a good workout and exchanged a few flirty DMs with him in the car. I felt alive. I felt like myself. I walked up to our apartment door, digging for my keys. I remember thinking that the good feeling would probably disappear the second I walked inside, and saw Mark on the couch, illuminated only by the light of his phone. I was already preparing myself for the silence. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. The first thing I saw wasn't him on the couch. The living room light was on, which was strange. And standing in the middle of the room next to 2 packed duffel bags and a cardboard box full of his things was Mark. His face was pale, and his eyes were completely empty. My heart didn't just drop, it slammed into the floor. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My fantasy world and my real life, 2 things I had kept so carefully separated in my mind, had just crashed into each other. "Mark," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing?" He finally looked at me, and it was like looking at a stranger. The quiet, passive man I lived with was gone. This person's eyes were hard, like dark stones. There was no sadness in them, no confusion. Just a chilling emptiness. "I know," he said. His voice was flat. "I know about him. Your trainer." The blood drained from my face. How? My mind raced, but there was only one possibility. My phone. My Instagram. He had gone through my messages. A part of me screamed about the violation of privacy, but that was drowned out by the bigger, louder reality of the bags on the floor. He picked one up. "Don't I?" Choked out, taking a step forward. "Mark, please. Don't just walk out." "What is there to talk about?" he said, not even looking at me, as he slung the duffel bag over his shoulder. "I saw the messages. I saw the pictures. All of it." He started to walk past me toward the door, and a raw panic clawed its way up my throat. I couldn't let him leave like this. Not in the middle of the night, not with this cold, hard silence between us. I grabbed his arm. "Please," I begged, and I hated how pathetic I sounded. "Just come back inside. Don't go tonight. We can talk in the morning. Please just give me a chance to explain. I need you to understand. I wasn't trying to save us. I think I knew in that moment that it was already over. But I couldn't let our 6 years end with him walking out in disgust without ever knowing the whole story. The times why, asterisk." He stopped his back to me. He stood there for a long time, and I could feel the tension in his arm. Finally, he let out a long, tired sigh and dropped the bag. He walked back into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the floor. He didn't say a word. I went to our bedroom and shut the door. Neither of us slept. I just lay there in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, feeling the weight of him in the next room. The silence I had hated for years had transformed into something so much worse. It was active. It was suffocating. The next morning felt like a funeral. The sun was streaming in through the blinds, but the apartment felt gray and cold. I found him in the kitchen making coffee like it was any other day. The routine was so normal it made my stomach hurt. I sat down at our small kitchen table. "Mark?" I started, my voice shaky. He didn't turn around. "Just say it." So I did. I told him everything. I admitted to the messages, the pictures. I confessed that I had kissed him once after a session at the gym. A stupid, impulsive kiss that I had immediately regretted, which was a lie, but it felt less awful than admitting the whole truth of my emotional betrayal. I apologized. I told him how sorry I was for the pain I caused him, and I meant it. My tears were real. Then I tried to make him understand. I was so lonely, I said, my voice breaking. I felt like you weren't here even when you were sitting right next to me. I tried to tell you so many times. It felt like I was screaming and you couldn't hear me. He listened. He saw me. It wasn't about him, not really. It was about feeling like a person again. I laid it all out. The faded passion, the roommate phase, the failed date nights, the feeling of being part of the furniture. I wasn't trying to excuse what I did. I was trying to explain the cracked foundation we have been living on. I wanted him to see the whole ugly, broken picture, not just the piece he found on my phone. When I finished, I was crying, just waiting for him to say something. Anything. He finally turned around a mug of coffee in his hand. The look on his face was one I'll never forget. It was a mix of disgust and a strange, bitter pity. "So that's your excuse?" he said, his voice quiet but sharp. "You were lonely, so instead of trying harder with me, you sent nudes to some guy at your gym. You think that makes it okay?" "No, it doesn't make it okay," I cried. "Nothing makes it okay. But it's the reason. I'm not a monster, Mark. I was just hurting." "You know what hurts," he said, stepping closer. "It hurts that for the last 6 months while I was working overtime to save up for a ring because I was finally ready to stop being a stupid kid and give you what you wanted, you were sexting someone else. It hurts that every time you said you were going to the gym, you were going to see him. I didn't see you because you weren't here. You had already checked out. A ring." The word hung in the air between us, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. All this time, his quietness, his distance, I had seen it as him pulling away. But he was planning a future. While I was escaping into a fantasy, he was trying to build a real one. He saw the shock on my face. He just shook his head, a single humorless laugh escaping his lips. "Yeah. Pathetic, right?" He walked past me into the living room and picked up his bags again. This time I didn't try to stop him. There was nothing left to say. My explanation wasn't a reason, it was just an excuse for betrayal. He heard what I said, but he couldn't see past what I did. I couldn't blame him. He paused at the door. "The dogs." He started, his voice thick for the first time. "I'll take care of them," I said quickly. "You can see them whenever you want." He nodded, not looking at me. And then he opened the door and walked out. The click of the lock was the loudest sound I've ever heard. I stood there in the middle of my apartment for I don't know how long. Then one of the dogs, our goofy golden retriever, came over and nudged my hand with his wet nose, whining softly. And I just collapsed. Now I'm surrounded by the aftermath. The apartment is too big for one person. His side of the closet is empty. His favorite mug is still sitting by the sink. I'm left with the two dogs who keep looking at the door, waiting for him to come home. And I'm left with the silence. The same silence I hated, the one I ran from. But it's different now. It's not the silence of a relationship dying. It's the silence of a relationship that's already dead. He got what he always seemed to want: peace and quiet. And I'm left with a ghost of a man I loved but couldn't reach in a life I single-handedly destroyed.